guys, this is okay. This is a practical topic, but unfortunately, we are not able to show you the instruments live. But tried to take efforts to show you the pictures and to give the users of it. Right? So when you guys come back later on, maybe we can show you the instruments, and it will be easier for you to remember the uses. So yeah. Okay. All right. So periodontal surgery. So out of in periodontal surgery, the most common procedures are either gingivectomy, flap surgery, and any kind of an osseous surgery or the treatment of bony defects. So these three are most common periodontal surgeries that are performed with the aim of getting access to the roots of the teeth and to remove the bacteria from plaque and calculus, which allows reduction of the pocket and correction of any kind of osseous or bone defects. But when we are doing the surgeries, you need particular instruments. The routine scaling and routine instruments are not going to help. So it is important we have a thorough knowledge of these instruments for the effective usage. So we'll see what these instruments are, so that as the viewers come, we'll admit them and continue. Okay. So yeah. The surgical instruments can basically be incisional and excisional instruments. These are the ones which are used to cut or remove any soft tissue. Surgical curettes and sickles. These are slightly different from the conventional Gracies and the universal curettes. These are used to remove granulation tissue and hard or tenacious chunks of calculus. Then you have periosteal elevators to raise or lift a flap. Surgical chisels, which are used with the mallet to cut off heavy chunks of calculus or modify the shape of bone. Sorry. So surgical chisels are used for that. Surgical files are used to smoothen or recontour any surface. Scissors can be used to cut tissue or sutures. And hemostats or tissue forceps to hold either the tissues or materials. So broadly they are grouped into these categories. So we will go through what instruments are there. So incisional and excision instruments basically involve the knives. These are the periodontal and the interdental knives. Then you have surgical blades and electrosurgery, which involves electric current to cut tissue. So among the periodontal and interdental knives, the most commonly used and available are the Kirkland knife and the Orban's knife. So the first one, the A, is a Kirkland knife which has a kidney-shaped end, and the Orban's knife which has a spear-shaped end. So what is the Kirkland knife used for? It is mainly used to cut any portion of gingiva. It is used for gingivectomy. You can see in this left top image how the instrument is placed to cut off any excessive growth of gingiva. Again, it could be a double or a single-ended instrument. As I said, it's not exactly a kidney shape, but it's said to be kidney shape, and it has the entire periphery as its cutting edge. So the Kirkland knife is used to cut any excess amount of gingiva. Orban's interdental knife, as the name suggests, it is mainly used in the interdental area. Here you can see how the instrument is adapted to remove after the after the bulk of tissue is removed. Interdental areas can be refined using the Orban's knife. Again, a single or double-ended instrument, spear shape as I said, and both sides of the spears are having a cutting edge. So even the outer and the inner side both can cut the tissue. Orban's knife has got double end, and one end has got two angles. One with the blade and the shank and the handle. Another end has got three angles. So the end with the three angles is used in the posterior area as it helps in better adaptation of the adaptation of the instrument in the posterior area. The very field knife is similar to the Orban's knife, but not very popular as the design is very similar to that of the Orban's knife. So Orban's knife is most commonly used incidental instrument.
Excuse me, sir.
Yeah.
So some people are in the lobby, I think.
There's only one unknown user in the lobby. I can see one. I have admitted that person multiple times. I don't know him. नाम नहीं आ रहा, so I think I'll not admit that person.
Okay, sir.
Everybody has a name. This guy doesn't have a name, so let's leave it. Otherwise, waiting. Alright, so we saw about the Orban's knife. Number one, with a 2-angled end, and number two with a 3-angled end used for the posterior areas. Very filled knife, similar to Orban's knife. Another thing is a Goldman Fox knife. Again, these knives used in the incidental areas. Similar to Orban's knife, but this got a much sharper end. This looks more like a spear knife, but the one change is that it has about a offset, 90-degree offset, which helps in adaptation in the posterior areas. So it is turned to the side, that's the offset blade, that helps in using or cutting the internal tissues in the posterior areas. The other end can be used for the anterior areas. And surgical blades, you guys are aware, just to know the different types. Number 11, number 12, 12D, 15 and 15C. Alright, so number 11, not very commonly used in periodontics, but it is used to drain or give a stabbing incision on an abscess. It can drain the abscess. Number 12 is most commonly used in the circular region to give circular incision. So it is a beak shaped, pointed, having a pointed end. The number 12 has a cutting edge only on the inside. The inner side of the curve is having a cutting edge, so it can be adapted within the surface to give a circular incision. 12D is a modification of 12, where you have, along with the inner cutting edge, you have an outer cutting edge. So again, it's a beak shape, pointed end, two cutting edges. So advantage is that it allows to work in the narrower and restricted areas in both pull and push motions. So you don't have to just move the blade in one direction, you can go in the opposite direction and have a cut given because it has two cutting edges. So 2ID is a very beneficial type of blade, mainly in the circular use. 15, most important blade used for thinning the flaps and giving the first incision, that is the internal bevel incision in modified knee flap or giving a split thickness flap. You use this instrument. So you see it's more straightish compared to the 12 number blade. And a modification of 15 number blade is 15C. It has a more longer and narrower cutting edge. It's a narrow version of 15, and again it can be used as a substitute to your 12 number blade. This can be used in the circular incisions and helps in giving short and precise incisions as the blade is very narrow. So the 5 types of blades are used to give any kind of a cut or an incision. Again, you have a PP handle to where these blades are attached. So most commonly used is a number 3 handle. It looks like this, and it has certain markings which help you to measure the cut tissue also, how much amount of tissue you have cut, you can measure it, and the blades are attached on the handle. Long handles 5, 7, 9 are also available, but not commonly used in periodontal surgeries. Then this is something new, electrosurgery. As the name suggests, it uses controlled high frequency electric current. So electric current will generate heat, and that heat will help to cut the tissue. It is available in different types and sizes. These are called as electrodes. These electrodes are attached onto the handpiece, onto the machine. They can be cutting or incising tissue. Then you have the loop electrodes, which are used to plane or smooth out the soft tissues. And you have the heavier or the bulkier electrodes, the last one, which has a ball end, which helps in coagulation. That is, it controls bleeding if there is excessive bleeding. This is how incision given after electrosurgery looks like. So electric current generating heat will cut the tissues, and then the hanging tissues can be removed using your curettes. Let me just check somebody is waiting. Okay, I don't think. Right. Surgical curettes and sickle are slightly different from the conventional universal and braces curettes. These are used to remove granulation tissue which is stuck between the interdental areas. After you raise a flap, you need to remove the interdental tissue, which is mainly the granulation tissue, fibrous interdental tissue, and tenacious or very hard, blackish appearing subgingival deposits of calculus. If you're using on a pocket lining, this is how your surgical curette is adapted, and you can scrape off the ulcerated lining to give you a clean surface of the tooth as well as a healthy gingival tissue to adapt onto the tooth surface. These curettes are called as heavy curettes. Names are Pritchard curette or Kirkland surgical curette. This is how they appear. As you can see, they are quite bulkier than the normal conventional scaling and root cleaning instruments and have a wider blade as compared to the universal curettes. Then you have heavy sickles. Example is a ball sickle. It appears like this with a bead-shaped end used in the interdental areas mainly to remove chunks of calculus, heavy calculus. And the most important instrument in periodontics is the periosteal elevator. So it is used to reflect and move a flap after the incisions are made for flap surgery. You can see how the instrument is adapted. The circular and vertical incisions are given here. The periosteal elevator is placed between the gingiva and the bone to raise a full thickness flap. This is a Woodson periosteal elevator commonly used, which has a spoon-like end and a sharp spear-like end. The sharp end is mainly used in the anterior areas, maybe lower anterior areas where the wider end cannot fit properly. And the spoon-shaped end is used for the maxillaries or the posterior areas. Always remember, the concave surface faces towards the bone. If it faces towards the gingiva, there is a high chance that it will cut the gingiva and come out of the leaves. These are the variations. Closer periodontal elevator, which has a much straighter spoon end. Then you have Pritchard periosteal elevator, with a wider surface on one end, which helps in reflecting wider flaps, mainly the maxillary regions. If you're using a sinus lift procedure or creating or want to take a bone graft, you need to raise a larger flap. And you have Goldman Fox periosteal elevator, which has got spoon shapes on both ends, which are much straighter compared to the Woodson periosteal elevator. So depending on the purpose of the surgery, depending on what type of flap you want to raise, you can use these elevators. Then chisels. Chisel, as the name suggests, it is used to sculpt or remove any kind of a hard tissue. Mainly we are going to use it for removing bone. They can either be used in a pull stroke or a push stroke. It is used for cutting or removing bone, which helps to recontour the alveolar crest also and harvest some kind of graft. In this image you can see scrapings of bone are taken, which can act as bone particles for grafting procedures. These can be divided into directing it in a forward direction. Example is an Ocean bend chisel. And the back action chisel means the chisel are pulled back. So it's using, it is used in a pull motion. Example is a Rhodes chisel. This is how an Ocean bend chisel is adapted to remove widow's peak. But what widow's peak? These are unsupported bony margins, mainly present on the line angle of teeth. This can cause creation of pocket. So chisel is adapted, and this portion of unsupported bone is taken off. Unlike the rod scissor, which is using a pull motion, it is adapted along the base of the bone and it is pulled to remove the junk. So this soft tissue or the gingiva can adapt properly to the annular bone. This is the example and how they appear. The ocean bend chisel. These are paired instruments and they have curvatures in the opposite direction. So depending on whether you want to use it on the buccal surface, lingual surface, you can use the instrument. And these are the back action chisel which has got a sharp edge. So these edges help to pull or scrape the bone to remove the bone. Then obviously a chisel is always used with a mallet. Whenever a mallet appears, a mallet can also be used with osteotomes. Osteotomes are used mainly in the implant procedures. Right now we don't have to deal with implants, we'll have a separate lecture on that. So straight chisels, not back action. Files. These files can either be curved or straight. The curve, this image you can see the first image is a image of a curved file. This is called as a sugar file. The straighter ones are called as a sugarman file. It is a double-ended instrument used for medial distal or buccolingual surfaces. Again, mainly used in the interdental areas to remove bone. And just like you file any structure, even a wood or acrylic is used in a push and pull motion. Similarly, these files are used to remove bone in a push and pull motion. This is a diagrammatic representation of how a crater is converted into a proper bony architecture. The buccal and the lingual edges are filed. Since you don't want to remove too much of bone, these files are very beneficial. You can slightly grind that portion and give you a much flatter and better architecture of the bone. Files are used to remove portions of bone in interdental area. Then you have tissue fossa. As the name suggests, it is used to hold tissues. Example is the Deepbeki tissue fossa, which is a straighter one, and it's got some serrations to hold the tissue firmly so that the tissue doesn't lose out of the grip. Used to hold flap during suturing. That's another example, and it helps in repositioning the flap. So you can just pull the flap and see how much area it is covering, so that it can be displayed apically or coronally wherever you want to move it. It is not possible to use another instrument, so these are precisely used for repositioning the flap and holding them during suturing. Can be available as plain or one with a tooth. Tooth is used to hold thicker flaps so that it doesn't slip out of the cast. And example is an Addison tissue fossa. Plain ones are used for partial thickness slabs which are very thin, and the tooth one is used for full thickness slabs which are generally thicker. It can also be used to hold materials like the GTR membrane and can be placed into the bone defects. Another example is a corn suture plier, which has got holes at the end. So tissue will be trapped inside this fossa, and suture can be passed through these openings, which will easily suture the tissue without losing the grasp. And there is hemostat. Hemostat is nothing but an instrument used to clamp or obstruct the flow of blood. That's what is called as hemostat. But it is a multi-purpose instrument. You can use it for removing small root tips also and grasping loose objects like a periodontal pack. When the surgery is done, if it's hanging, instead of poking using a probe, you can just hold the pack with a forceps or a hemostat and pull it off. So major uses to clamp blood vessels if it's bleeding, and other uses could be to remove small pieces of roots or remove the periodontal plaque. This can be available as straight or they can be available as curved instruments. Straighter ones are mainly used in the anterior regions and curved in the posterior regions so that it is easy to grasp the structures. Scissors can be ER membranes. This is an example of tissue cutting scissor available in our department. And the users are to remove tags of tissues which are left after gingivectomy to smoothen the surface to give a proper finishing. The edges of the tissue can be trimmed off using a gold oxygen. Again, margins of flap and thick can be trimmed off for proper adaptation on the bone surface. To enlarge incisions in periodontal abscesses and to remove muscle attachment during mucogingival surgery. Whenever you are placing any kind of a pre-gingival graft or connective tissue graft, you need to prepare a recipient bed. To prepare that bed, scissors can cause bigger incisions. Blades can cause bigger incision, and scissors can give you much more precision. So these scissors can be used to remove muscle attachment, mainly in the lower anterior areas. Those were tissue cutting scissors. These are the suture cutting scissors. They can be straight or they can be curved. Basically used to cut off the ends of sutures. Tissue nippers. Tissue nippers are nothing but similar to your scissors, which are used to cut off loose ends or abnormal or improper finished areas can be properly finished using these tissue nippers. So they are useful for accentuating the contour of the gingiva after any kind of a soft tissue surgery. Mainly the gingivectomy surgery is followed by use of tissue nippers. Just trim off and give a flushing surface. So it's used for blending two or more surgical procedures within a surgical site. Another material available in our department is the Crane Kaplan pocket marker. Crane Kaplan is the name of the person who invented it. So it measures the depth of the pocket. Any kind of a pseudo pocket which is fibrous. So these materials have got a flat end which goes into the pocket and a tooth end which creates a marking on the outer. So start at the distal end where the feeding points are not lost and proceed anteriorly towards the midline. This is how you place it in the surface. One end will record the depth of the pocket and another end will cause a punch on the outer labial surface. This can give you a guide from where you have to cut the tissue. And finally, needle holders, basically used to hold suture needles. Used to suture the flap at desired position after surgery procedure has been complete. So any kind of procedure will end with suturing, and needle holders are used to hold the needle of the suture. It is available as conventional or gastrovisual. Gastrovisual is basically an ophthalmic scissor, and since those surgeries are really very precise and fine, we use these gastrovisual surgeries for our mucogingival or perioplastic surgery, mainly the grafting procedures. Conventional needle holder is used for major flap surgeries, and gastrovisual used for excision surgeries. These are available, the straighter ones, the conventional ones are available from small to large, depending on whether you want to work in the anterior, premolar or molar regions, where you can extend the tip of the needle holder, and it is always available in serrations that can grasp the needle properly. Gastrovisual, it is used for delicate, precise techniques, and it has a lock system which ensures that the needle is firmly secured and doesn't move out of the hold of the needle holder. This is how gastrovisual needle holders appear. They have a very fine and a small end, and they have a locking system. This is a locking system for a gastrovisual system. Gastrovisual needle holder, which does not allow the needle to slip from the grasp. Alright, so these were the instruments what we saw. So it is available with us, and whenever you come back to the department, we can show you these. So we saw about the incisional and excision instruments, the curettes, the elevator, chisel, files, scissors, forceps and nippers, hemostats, and the needle holder. All these instruments, the majority of them are available in Karanza 13th edition. You can go through the chapter. Most of the pictures are from there, so it will be easier for you to recollect what we've done today. And you can download a surgical catalog of 2 3D. It's got a very beautiful to refer back to these instruments, before you come back to the department, you can refer Karanga and the catalog of surgical instruments from UPD. Alright, if you have any doubts, you can ask me right now also. We have some time, or contact me on WhatsApp, or make a note of it, and whenever you want to contact me, you can. That's those are the instruments we generally use in a periodontal surgery. Any questions to anybody?